This will probably be my first and last post here, considering I'm a lurker and not very familiar with the website. My boyfriend put the idea in my head to share some of my stories I have with /x/. I have quite a few to talk about, so if anyone's interested, I'm rather good at running my mouth. When I was about 6 years old, I lived out in the middle of nowhere in the Appalachian Mountains. We were 30 minutes away from any civilization, and our neighbors were antisocial and usually not my age. We were settling down one night when we all heard pounding on our door. We figured it was a pillhead, so we hid in the hallway. For the next 20 minutes I heard screaming and cries for help. The guy dragged his hands across our trailer and was scratching and shit. Probably was on meth now that I think about it. After he finally shut up, the entire family piled outside onto our front porch to see blood everywhere. Bloody handprints, bloody footprints, general spatter. It looked like the guy had been mauled or exploded or something. The worst part was the blood wasn't quite that deep, dark red. It was pinkish almost, and had a gel-like consistency to it. My parents went in to call the police, and I went to the bathroom. Our bathroom was a hellscape unto itself, but that's a story for another time. Our trailer was prolapsing because it was nearly 40 years old, so the half of the house that the bathroom was in only had some power. I look up in the bedroom next to the bathroom, and see the blood had spattered everywhere in there as well. It was of the ceiling, dripping down on my head. I screamed for my mom, and ran out, but when I ran back in, the blood had mostly disappeared. The only thing it clung to were these posters that my parents had up around the room. When the police had got there, the blood on the outside had fully disappeared, and I imagined my parents got reprimanded for wasting the policeman's time since it's so far out. All that was left were slight handprints. OP here, to answer some things asked. I have no idea what that blood stuff was. I know it sounds cheesy, but for most of my life I've chalked it up to a bear attack or just not really thought of it. We'll be posting another story in a different reply. This story is more lax and closer to a fever dream if anything. I still doubt myself on this a lot, but I genuinely think it's real. I think at this time I was about 8, and as stupid Southerners do, we were sat around the TV during the evening. Then the trailer walls started rumbling. My mom said something to the effect of "they found us," and we all piled into the hallway of the trailer, which was the most stable part of the house. I remember the TV went to the DVD screen and all the lights had turned off from all the rumbling, coating the entire living room and hallway in blue. I remember turning to my mom and asking who found us, and she replied, "The aliens." Sounds tropey, but this is where my memory cuts it. My memory jumps to us being in our old car, driving past a cop car. It was covered in this opalescent black substance, like acid. I remember turning to my mom and saying, "What happened to the police officer?" She replied, "The aliens got him." You'd think this would be a running joke, but my mom said this in a fully serious tone. Still could be, who knows. After that I remember I wasn't quite right. I began seeing the static as an overlay whenever I looked around. I later found out that this was visual snow. I would also see desaturated shapes and images whenever I'd go to sleep. I most commonly would see trees, a rainbow pinwheel type thing, or just dots. I think these are hypnagogic hallucinations. But I have no fucking idea, to tell you the truth. This also got worse with age, but I'll cover that more later. For a while I was completely fine, or at least I think I was. My memory eludes me. I think I will post one more time tonight, and post another story tomorrow. Coming back with another post before I go to bed tonight. This was a smaller happening, but a few months after the blood happening happened. Me and my parents were driving back home from town. It's a far drive, so it ended up being twilight before we actually got home. My mom looked out the window and saw this orange thing. It was an oval, fully orange with white and red lights. 8-year-old me thought it was the fucking Nickelodeon blimp. Was mega sad when I couldn't see the letters. It was kind of funny, but blimps wouldn't usually pass through our area ever because I assume the mountains and trees are too much, plus it was the middle of the night. I made a drawing of it, and put it on the fridge. My parents are drunk and have it put somewhere because it's a really old drawing, but I think I could drudge it up eventually. Now here I'm gonna give you a few options for what story you want to see next. General happenings on the landscape before I was born. The white deer happening. The noises in the woods. I'll end up talking about all of these eventually, but I will talk about one tomorrow in specifics. Good night. Someone requested general weird happenings last night. This might end up being a multiple post thing. My family isn't that great, they're drug addicts and sort of deranged. My mom decided after our first family cat died we were going to get another one, and we ended up with 3 female cats. Those 3 female cats over the course of about 6 to 8 years spawned about 30 inbred hoarded animals. We had so many cats that they were actually dying of overpopulation. I think when I hit around 12, we had about 50 of them running around. I remember waking up to my mom panicked because all of the cats simultaneously died except for my parents' favorites that they coveted inside. There weren't any wounds, so we surmised poisoning being a cause. Before and after the poisoning incident, the entire property always smelled of death. Like rotting carcasses constantly. I would always see vultures flying overhead, but whenever I would try to find the body there was nothing there. Aside from my story, my best friend actually had a similar experience in my area, where everywhere smelled of death constantly. She definitely wasn't a neighbor though, but I digress. People were also known to spontaneously just have heart attacks, or commit suicide there. My father grew up there and ended up telling me that he had multiple neighbors die of heart attacks before I was born. Some more dramatic than others. This stuff definitely seems to have been going on for a long time. The last day I actually lived there, somebody committed suicide up the road from us actually. I remember the vultures encircled the house even though I was sure her body had already been taken. An anon requested for the deer story, so I will oblige. I was a preteen, and my parents were letting me hang out in my yard at night for the first time in a long time, so I really liked staying out /extra/late. I was on the phone with pre-mentioned best friend. We were hanging out and talking for about an hour, when I saw across the road in my neighbor's yard there was an albino deer. It was a buck with antlers. It looked somewhat emaciated and its eyes, I remember, were a bit larger than the average deer. I described that to my friend, and she started flipping out and telling me to leave. I thought I was hallucinating and squinted to see it. Then the deer stood up on its hind legs like a person, with its front hooves at its side, just staring at me. For some fucking ungodly reason I still refused to leave and wanted to get a better look at it, until I got frustrated about how I couldn't see it too well and went inside to grab my glasses. When I went back outside, the deer was gone. I'm going to attach a really shitty drawing I did of the deer. I feel like some visuals may be appreciated. Thank you. The noises in the woods is a similar story to the deer one. I was out really late at night in the middle of the summer, in a phone call with my best friend. We were talking about stuff when I started to hear screams from deep within the woods. Now in my area we have mountain lions, and foxes. Those both make some pretty weird ass noises, but I knew their calls well and I was able to tell the calls were human. It was really deep into the woods/mountains, they weren't screaming for help, just like gutturally shouting every night for a few days. This might be my last post tonight, I'm not too sure, getting sleepy. It was the middle of summer during this story, and every summer without fail the smell of dead animal would be way worse than the rest of the year. It was to the point where I could barely stand to be outside even though I really liked the fireflies. I was, as per usual, staying out in my yard at 1 to 3 a.m. We have coyote packs roaming around making noises, but I would never see them. The cats were repopulating with kittens. Many of my parents would just throw outside. Of course I didn't want to find more kitten carcasses than usual, so I would guard them. I would stay in calls with friends, usually to calm my nerves because I'm an anxious wreck. This weird thing kept happening when I was in a call with my BF, where all of the bugs would go fully silent. No noises, no anything. All simultaneously. Neither of us knew what this meant at the time, and I would just keep hanging out in my yard until one night when I was alone, and not in a call, I saw a coyote. Just one. Worth mentioning that there was only one street light by my house, and my house only when it was an area big enough to fit 5 to 6 other houses. Something off put me about it, and I just got really afraid and went inside and locked the doors. Years later my BF picked up an interest in supernatural BS and started prodding at me for details about this, and I remembered I didn't see a tail on that thing. I sort of figured that none would care about childhood trauma kind of stuff that coincided with the paranormal BS. I might go more in depth later if I feel comfortable though. This was the last time we would hear from her. Thank you for listening to the end.